So for me, the first point is communication with your customers. So it's really, really important to communicate with your client in advance what your fees are going to be. Agree that with them up front, so there's no nasty surprises later and there's no challenges when you then come to invoice your bill. But the communication isn't just about how much you're going to charge. It's making sure you're both on the same page. So do we know when the work's going to be done? When can the client expect an invoice from you when it's finished? How are you going to send it? How do you want payment? If all of these things are discussed up front, it makes the whole process much easier for you to then follow up on afterwards. And most businesses will invoice at the end of a job, but there are a few cases where actually you might want to consider invoicing earlier if you're able to. So to use a few specific examples, in the construction industry, you're often invoicing for materials as well as your labour. If you are currently invoicing for everything at the end of the job, you might want to consider invoicing for the cost of the materials at the start. And that means you're getting some cash in early on to help you pay for those materials, as opposed to you being in a cash deficit until the very end of the project. So if you're not already doing so, that's something you might want to consider. And there are other industries where deposits or upfront payments may also be suitable. So it's worth thinking about whether that might apply to you. And where we have longer term projects, design projects, engineering projects, anything like that, where you might be working over a longer period of time, if you're not already doing so, then consider whether that can be broken down into measurable stages. And again, this comes down to that communication at the very start. So do you have to wait until the end to build a project, or actually can we recognise stages in between and generate invoices as you go along, which in turn brings in cash as you go along? So these are things that might be specific to certain industries, but do sometimes get overlooked. So worth thinking about the timing of your actual invoices, and as long as you're communicating that with your clients, there'll be no issues there. The other point I would like to make is just to make sure you are putting aside time to actually generate those invoices. It's very easy when we get busy to put off admin tasks, but it's really important to ensure that raising your sales invoices is not one of those admin tasks that gets put to one side. And if you're not already doing so, are you able to send your invoices by email to get them to your customers as quickly as possible? Or better still, if you're using software, you can often send those invoices by email directly through your software. It automates the process, making it easier and more efficient for you. It looks great from the client's end as well when they receive it. It looks really professional, but it all speeds up the process of getting your invoices to the client, and in doing so, getting the monies in. Then when it comes to thinking about the monies themselves, have you communicated your payment terms? This might be as simple as a due date on the invoice. You might state that your payment terms are 14 days, 30 days, etc. It will be different for different industries. And also think about those payment terms. Are you being too generous with how long you're giving people to pay? If you can shorten that, then do so. Remember to include your bank details on your invoices to encourage direct payments. And we're seeing more and more clients now actually refusing to accept cash and cheque payments. That might be something you want to do, especially with less access to the banks now. Just bear in mind who your customer base is. Not everybody uses online banking, so you don't want to alienate your customers if your customers are members of the public. So just bear that in mind first. If you're using software, then consider the integrating of online applications such as PayPal, Go Cardless. There are a number of them out there. Basically, any way that you can add a Pay Now button to your invoice is bound to speed up the receipts coming in, because what you're doing by integrating that is you're making it quick and convenient for your customers to pay you. And any way that you can do that is bound to speed up the monies coming in. But perhaps the most important point from me is to actually keep your bookkeeping up to date. And I'm sure many of you used to being nagged from your accountant about this, but keeping your records up to date means that you actually know who owes you money. If you don't know who your debtors are, you can't follow them up. And again, if you're able to use software to make that easier for you and take up less of your time, then great. And a lot of the software now has direct bank feeds, which takes a lot of the onus out of the bookkeeping. So really should take less and less of your time, but it's really important to do. The next step, once you've got complete records, is to then actually use them. So if you're able to generate a debtors list, how often are you reviewing that to see who's paying you on time, but who's actually late? And if you do have people who are outside your payment terms, whatever that may be, make sure you're making the time to actually use that list to follow up on those customers. Keep in communication with them. They may not have received your invoice, or there may be something else going on, but make sure you're opening up that communication, and do so sooner rather than later, because the older a debt becomes, it can get more difficult to collect on that. So keep that line of communication open, review your debtors regularly, and make sure you follow up. And in an ideal world, you can actually go a step further if you're on top of that, and perhaps contact clients just before they're hitting the due date. Did you receive the invoice or the email? Do you have any further work? It's a great opportunity to potentially start discussions on future projects as well. But the key thing is making sure they've got your invoice, are they in a position to make payments? And if you can get in front of that before it's already late, then even better. So my key points then for managing the sales side of your cash flow is open communication with your customers from the outset. Make sure that you both have expectations that are in line. Look at your systems. Are your systems set up to make life as simple as you as possible? So are you generating your invoices efficiently? Are you sending them to your customers in an efficient way? Are you making it easy for them to pay you? And if you're not already using software, now would be a great time to consider that. The more you can automate your system, the more of your time you get back. And finally, make sure that whatever system you're using, whether it be cloud-based software or you're still choosing to use handwritten records, make sure you do have a system and you are keeping it up to date so that you always know your current position. And that's going to be the key to really making sure you're on top of your cash flow. And if there are bad times ahead, you can see them come in and plan ahead for that and put steps in place to minimise the impact. So just a few key points there, focusing on the sales side of the system, but definitely the first place to look when you're looking to improve and manage your cash flow.